You will hear a number of different recordings. And you will have to answer questions on what you hear. There will be time for you to read the instructions and questions. And you will have a chance to check your work. All the recordings will be played once only. At the end of the test, you will be given 10 minutes to transfer your answers to an answer sheet.
First, you have some time to look at question 1 to question 10.
Hello there. Can I have your attention, please? We've got a lot to cover today and we need to get started. If you recall, last week we discussed the AIDS epidemic and its effect on healthcare systems in the countries with the highest incidence. Well, today I'm going to speak about another significant disease that is rather closely associated with the AIDS epidemic: tuberculosis. In the UK, active tuberculosis, otherwise known as TB, was common in the 19th century, the old consumption of romantic novels. Since then, better living conditions, better nutrition, immunisation and effective treatments in the 20th century have all combined to make TB uncommon in the UK today. However, TB is still common in developing countries and parts of Eastern Europe. It causes more deaths worldwide than any other infectious disease, about 3 million per year. This is a tragic statistic, since TB is now generally a curable disease. Overall, 1/3 of the world's population is currently infected with the bacteria that cause TB. However, people infected with TB bacilli will not necessarily become sick with the disease. The immune system walls off the TB bacilli, which, protected by a thick waxy coat, can lie dormant for years. It's estimated that 5 to 10% of people who are infected with TB bacilli, but who are not infected with HIV, become sick or infectious at some time during their life. Left untreated, each person with active TB disease will infect on average between 10 and 15 people every year. There are certain risk factors that make certain people more likely to become ill with TB. When people's immune systems are weakened, their chances of becoming sick are greater, for example, due to HIV infection, immune-suppressing treatment, or alcohol or drug addiction. Age is also a factor, with babies, young children, and the elderly being most susceptible. In addition, poor nutrition and lack of vitamin D are linked to TB. Finally, TB is more common in certain environments, such as among homeless people, among prisoners, in large cities, and in more impoverished areas. Until 50 years ago, there were no medicines to cure TB. Finding medicines to cure TB was a tremendous breakthrough. But now, strains that are resistant to a single drug have been documented in every country surveyed. What's more, strains of TB resistant to all major anti-TB drugs have emerged. Drug-resistant TB is caused by inconsistent or partial treatment, when patients do not take all their medicines regularly for the required period, because they start to feel better, because doctors and health workers prescribe the wrong treatment regimens, or because the drug supply is unreliable. A particularly dangerous form of drug-resistant TB is multi-drug-resistant TB, abbreviated as MDR-TB, which is defined as the disease caused by TB bacilli resistant to at least the 2 most powerful anti-TB drugs. Rates of MDR-TB are high in some countries, especially in the former Soviet Union, and threaten TB control efforts. While drug-resistant TB is generally treatable, it requires extensive chemotherapy, up to 2 years of treatment, with second-line anti-TB drugs. These second-line drugs are more costly than first-line drugs and produce adverse drug reactions that are more severe, though still manageable. The recent emergence of extensively drug-resistant TB, called XDR-TB, particularly in settings where many TB patients are also infected with HIV, poses a serious threat to TB control, and confirms the urgent need to strengthen basic TB control and to apply the new WHO guidelines for the management of drug-resistant.
First, you have some time to look at question 11 to question 20.
Well, I've been talking to managers in a number of businesses and reading surveys about the future of management. And what I'm going to present in this seminar is a few ideas about how the activity is likely to change in the next 10 years. It isn't a scientific statistical analysis, just some ideas for us to discuss. One area I want to mention is business markets, and I'm sure a really significant development will be a major increase in competition, with companies from all around the world trying to sell similar products. Consumers will have much more choice. For instance, food products sold in Australia might be manufactured in the USA, China, Finland, and dozens of other countries. At the same time, mergers and takeovers mean that governments are actually losing power to major global corporations. We can probably all think of companies that exert a great deal of influence, which may be good for consumers. A third point I want to make about markets is that in the rapidly expanding economies, such as India, China, Brazil, and Russia, demand is growing very fast. This is putting pressure on resources all over the world. I think businesses are becoming more open to external influences. In particular, companies are consulting customers more and more before making their business decisions. Companies are finding out what they want and providing it, instead of making products and then trying to sell them, which is the model of years ago. Another influence is that concerns about the environment will force manufacturers to extend product life cycles to reduce the amount of pollution and waste. And, in some cases, regulation will need to be strengthened. Many societies are much more fluid and democratic, and the structure of companies is changing to reflect that. I think we're going to see a greater emphasis within companies on teams created with a specific project in mind. And when they're completed, the teams will be disbanded and new ones formed. More and more people see work as simply one part of their lifestyle, and not the most important one. And as the workforce is shrinking in some countries, businesses are having to compete for staff instead of being able to choose among a lot of applicants. Typical examples that will attract and retain staff are traditional ones like flexible hours and, something that has been made possible by advances in technology, remote working, with people based at their home, abroad, or almost anywhere they choose. Management styles will almost certainly continue to change. Senior managers will require a lot more than the efficiency that they've always needed. Above all, they'll need great skills in leadership so that their organization can initiate and respond to change in a fast-moving world where they face lots of competing requirements and potential conflicts. In most of the world, the senior managers of large businesses are mainly men in their 50s and 60s. The predominant style of management will almost certainly become more consultative and collaborative, caused, above all, by more women moving into senior management positions. Many of the changes are influenced by developments in the wider economy. The traditional emphasis of business was manufacturing, and of course the service sector is very important. But we shouldn't overlook the growing financial contribution of IP, that is, intellectual property. Some books and films generate enormous sums from the sale of related DVDs, music, games, clothes, and so on. Another point I'd like to make is that although I've been talking about companies, one trend that they have to face is the move away from people working for the same employer for years. Instead, more and more people are becoming self-employed to gain the freedom and control over their lives that they're unlikely to get from being employed. Okay, well, that's all I want to say, so let's open it up for discussion.
First, you have some time to look at question 21 to question 30.
Now today, we're looking at changes in communication, and specifically changes that have just happened or are likely to happen in the next few years. Key to this is the mobile phone, which is increasingly being seen as an all-purpose system rather than just a phone. If you only use your phone for texting and making calls now, you will be amazed at how you'll be using it in the future. The technology has been developed for a range of other uses. For example, phones could be used so that if you are meeting someone and they get lost, you could send them a map of your location to help them. This will save all those complicated explanations over the phone and our poor friends or colleagues trying to drive and find out where they are at the same time. And if you get bored waiting, or if you're traveling, for example, you will soon be able to see TV news on your phone as it is actually being broadcast. This means that you won't have to miss any of your favorites if you were away for a few days. Most people have got used to texting now, and young people send pictures to each other. But what is exciting is the possibility of putting music with them before you send them. And it's not all frivolous. Phones are going to become even more critical in business and education. Some recent developments have a highly practical usage. So, for example, as lecturers, we will be able to send everybody a text to let them know if lectures have been canceled. And the new phones could have a further use in education, as well as business, as they will enable us to go to any destination, such as when we are doing a field trip, for instance, and from there to send data directly to a computer so that we can access it when we get home. This means we will no longer be limited by what the phone can store. And it's interesting to look at the different ways that men and women use phones now, as that does affect how the technology will develop. Some research has been done on how people use phones, and some of the results are surprising. One of the increasing usages of mobile phones is to get all sorts of data, such as phone numbers, the weather, train times, etc. And while there's been an attempt to set up connections with things that women might be interested in accessing, it is overwhelmingly men who do this. But what about the traditional use of a phone? To speak to people? I suppose we would predict that it is mainly women who use phones as a method of contact for friends and family, but, in fact, the genders exploit this facility equally. I've spoken about the increased business usages that phones will offer, and I suppose we would associate this usage with men. The survey picked up, though, that women are often working from home or catching up with work in the evenings, so they use phones in this way as much as men do. Most of us are aware we can store photos on our phones. It's an ideal method of capturing a moment wherever you are. Women tend to be the group that keep photos on their phones, but it seems that men use their phones to actually take pictures much more than women do. And of course, all this knowledge affects the marketing that the companies will do in order to sell the phone.
First, you have some time to look at question 31 to question 40.
I'd like to introduce our speaker today, who has come all the way from Manchester. Dr. Paul Harold, the head of research in nutrition at Manchester University. He is going to talk to us about ways we can improve our lifestyle and fitness. This will include watching what we eat and being more careful about our calorie intake, as well as taking regular exercise. This is an important current issue, as many people eat too much junk food, and the nation as a whole is fatter than it was 100 years ago.
Thank you, James, for your introduction. You are absolutely right. Statistics show that the nation is heavier than it used to be, and this is due to the long hours that we work and the lack of time we have to prepare healthy meals that are low in fat and sugar. There are some simple steps everyone can take to help improve their general health. Maybe lose some weight first. In the long run, it could lower your cholesterol and blood pressure. The first thing to do in order to check that your weight is healthy is to work out your body mass index, or BMI. This is a tool that can help you find out if you are a healthy weight for your height. Obviously, the height of a person will affect what weight they should be. To work out your BMI, you should take your weight in kilograms and divide it by your height in meters. Then you divide the result by your height in meters again. The result you come up with can be checked on a chart to see if your BMI is too high, too low, or about right. Even if your BMI is about where it should be, it is still important to eat a healthy and well-balanced diet. A healthy diet involves consuming appropriate amounts of all the food groups, including an adequate amount of water. Nutrients can be obtained from many different foods, so there are a wide variety of healthy diets. To start with, it is important to eat starchy foods such as bread, cereals, potatoes, rice and pasta, together with fruit and vegetables, and this should provide the bulk of most meals. Some people wrongly think that starchy foods are fattening. In fact, they contain about half the calories than the same weight of fat. Also, starchy foods often contain a lot of fibre. When you eat starchy foods, you get a feeling of fullness, which helps to control appetite. It is also important to eat at least 5 portions, and ideally 7 to 9 portions, of a variety of fruit or vegetables each day. If you eat a lot of fruit and vegetables, then your chance of developing heart disease, a stroke, or bowel cancer are reduced. You also need a certain amount of protein to keep healthy. However, most people eat more protein than is necessary. You should choose poultry such as chicken or lean meat. There is evidence that eating oily fish helps to protect against heart disease. It is probably the omega-3 fatty acids in the fish oil that help to reduce build-up in the arteries. Aim to eat at least 2 portions of fish per week, one of which should be oily. Obviously, what we eat is highly important, but it is also crucial to do regular exercise, as it strengthens our heart, tones our muscles, and is also good for the mind. We're increasingly living in a world where physical activity has stopped being a day-to-day part of our lives. We have domestic appliances to wash and dry for us, and cars to get us around, and with the decline in manual labour, many of us spend our working days sitting at desks. Adults should do a minimum of 30 minutes moderate-intensity physical activity 5 days a week. You don't have to do the whole 30 minutes in one go. Your half hour could be made up of 3 10-minute bursts of activity spread through the day if you prefer. The activity can be a lifestyle activity, such as walking to the shops, or taking the dog out, or structured exercise or sport, or a combination of these. but it does need to be of at least moderate intensity. For bone health, activities that produce high physical stresses on the bones are necessary. Well, I hope you've learned some interesting facts from this talk and that it will help you to change your lifestyles for the better. Thank you for your attention, and I believe that James has some handouts to give you on this subject.
First, you have some time to look at question 41 to question 50.
Good afternoon. In the last few lectures, we've been covering the social and political pressures that influenced the rise of the rebellion of 1679. Today, I would like to focus on the Pleasanton town market. Now, why are we talking all about some market? It's not like it was the first market ever, or even a particularly large market. The Pleasanton town market is important because it is often mentioned in the literature found in the library. If you have ever been there, you have probably seen all of the handcrafted items sold there now. But what was originally bought and sold in the town market? In the beginning, the market sold products such as meats, furs, and simple tools. Over time, though, it became known as the place to find quality livestock. People came from all over the world to find the biggest and best cows, pigs, and chickens. In fact, the profits from the town market became the savior of a plummeting economy during a time of much turmoil. Not to be confused with the Reconstruction era, a period of rapid development came about in the 1660s as a result of the market's vendors contributing their profits to building up much-needed public facilities and defense, which would later make a huge impact on the outcome of the war. For many years, the market flourished and began to draw in large tourism crowds in addition to the throngs of livestock customers. However, as revolutions in farming came about, more people moved to farms far from the city centre. Customers grew more and more reluctant to travel all the way to the town centre for their meats, when they could easily choose to buy from local farmers near them for a fraction of the price. With such a fall in the profits of the town's major profit generator, some quality town planning was needed. In the mayoral election of 1668, a young man of little fame just barely claimed the popular vote, none other than the now legendary John C. Wiley. Wiley's first decision as mayor of Pleasanton was to deal with the quickly failing town market. The building with the large clock was a landmark that had symbolized growth in Pleasanton for a generation. Wiley decided to use the notoriety of the town market to set an example. During the historical Rotterdam Rebellion, Wiley gave all those involved lifetime prison sentences in the very same building. It stayed a prison for about 50 more years until they transported all remaining prisoners to other facilities and turned it into the historical monument today. Now that you know the basics of the history of the Pleasanton town market, I will introduce your next group project. I want you to make a short film based on the real historical events that occurred in Pleasanton before and during the uprising. I will give you some class time to look through the library's reference section, but you will be responsible for conducting further research outside of class. I suggest starting by looking for information on the market itself. You'll find plenty of information. In fact, some students complain that there is actually too much information on it. On your own time, you could find family members of old war veterans to conduct interviews. Sometimes they provide wonderful insight that you wouldn't find in proper history books. But be careful, an interview that is riddled with bias is useless. I myself have some very old photographs here that you are welcome to take a look at for some inspiration. I'm lucky enough to own this one of Jim Wiley himself. Very interesting to see, but does not provide enough information to add much to your film. Feel free to take this film into whatever direction you choose. You could even do a crime thriller based on real outlaws. All you would have to do is look through the newspaper archives in the crime section during that time period. Try to get as much detail as you can, but you may end up having to draw your own conclusions. Okay, that's enough from me, so let's go